Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be a very different kind of video. I'm going to be talking about some serious stuff, as you can probably tell from the title. So I'd like to say big trigger warning. I'm not sure what kind of things I'm going to be talking about. Sometimes I forget to put trigger warnings because I ramble, but please be kind to yourself. And if there's anything that even in the title you feel could trigger you, then please watch with discretion and please be kind to yourself. So today, again, I'm going to be talking about something pretty serious because I'm going to be talking about a relationship that I was in that was emotionally abusive. And there's a few reasons I am going to be talking about this. And the main one is that growing up, you learn a lot of things, right? You learn to look both ways when you cross the road. You learn to not talk to strangers, put on your seatbelt before you get in the car, before you get in the car, sorry. But you don't learn what to do when you get gaslit, or what to do when the person that you love isn't treating you the way that someone who loves you should treat you, and things of that nature. And it's just not something you learn because it isn't something you should ever go through. It's not something that should happen to a person. But I look back on myself during this time and I'm just like, how didn't you see this? Why didn't you save yourself? And I wish with every fiber of my being that I could go back in time and drag myself out of there. But you can't because you don't realize. And for that reason, I want to make a video like this to show people what it's like and to bring awareness to this kind of relationships and this kind of abuse, because people don't realize it when they're in it until it's too late. And I want to be a voice of reason for even one person. If even just one person sees this video and goes, hey, that's like my ex, or that's like my partner, and realizes that, then I'm happy. Because I felt probably the loneliest I've ever felt when this was happening to me. And I would never wish for anybody else to ever feel this way. As well as this, it's Domestic Violence Month, which is purely coincidence. I did not know this. I felt like a little sign from the universe as well to make this video as well. Obviously, a video of this nature is going to have a few disclaimers. First of all, this video is not to target my ex. This video is not to bring pity to me. I'm not doing this to create a pity party. I'm not looking for people to feel bad for me or for any kind of attention for me. I'm purely doing this because it took me so long to realize, like I said, what was happening to me, that I want to be able to help other people that could possibly be going through the same thing. Because sadly, since this has happened, I've spoken to friends about it, and I've had friends that have gone through the exactly the same thing with people in the industry, and that hurts me. And the fact that these people feel too scared to speak up and to, share their story makes me really sad as well. That's why I'm doing it. So yeah, I've already tried to film this video like 2-3 times now. And every time either my computer crashes or I was just cried through the entire thing. And I'm quite nervous about people not believing me. You put a story like this onto the internet and you're just opening the floodgates to people being like, you're lying, you're not telling the truth. But sadly, I have a lot of proof of things that happened to me. And I probably will try and keep the cuts to a minimum. But I also suffer really badly with like brain fog and rambling. So I'm going to try to keep things as concise as possible. But do pardon me if there's cuts because I ramble. I have like 6 pages of notes inside here, 6 bullet point pages, which is nuts. So let's just get started. So we should probably just start way back with the fact that growing up, I never was in a relationship. And I'm sure there's a plethora of reasons why I was not in a relationship, too picky, but probably more down to the fact that I had really strict parents who were like, you're not allowed a relationship till you're 30. And I took that personally. Also, I was, super work oriented growing up. I had a YouTube channel that I was working on in secondary school, and I was just focused on studying and getting good grades. And also, honestly, point blank, I was a loser at school. I doubt anyone even looked at me twice at school. I ate my lunch under the stairs with my friends. I was really not the coolest. I did not have a big line of people wanting to be with me. Let's just put it like that. And I also had this long, extensive history through my teen years growing up of guys just screwing me over. But through all of this, I was like, do you know what? When I finally find someone, they're going to be perfect because the universe is going to thank me for being so patient. And we'd always talk about what, as you do as like a teenage girl, just like romanticizing and imagining what this person's going to be like. So when I met this guy, if honestly felt like the universe plucked him out of nowhere and just dropped him into my lap. Like, he was so, in my eyes, completely perfect. Like, he ticked every box I think I ever could have had. We had like the same music taste, the same sense of humor. We liked the same TV shows. We had the same job. Like, we worked in the same field. Our friends got along so well. Our families got along so well. Everything. Like, it just felt so perfect. I loved this person so much in a way that I can only describe as naive. Like, I love them very purely and implicitly. And I have every love language under the sun. Like, I'm very much a hopeless romantic. I might be making myself sound super intense, but I just am a very simple person. I just like making the people that I love happy. And so, you know, so we're kind of long distance. We're about an hour away from each other. Like, whenever I'd go to visit, I'd go to his favorite bakery and I'd get him his like favorite stuff. Or I would send messages telling him how proud I was of him if I knew he wasn't doing good. I loved planning little dates for us and things for us to do. Like, you know, I was just very much that kind of person. And one thing that would get said to me quite often when we were together was, you know, oh, you're too good for me. Or, oh, don't you find it crazy how you have every love language and I have none of them? But you love me anyway, so it's okay. Like, that kind of thing was said quite a lot. And honestly, if somebody's telling you that you are too good for them, believe them, because that is coming from somewhere. And I wish I'd believed that. I don't want it to sound like we had from this video that it was constantly bad moments, because that's not what makes a relationship emotionally abusive, right? The reason it's hard to leave and why people struggle to walk away is because there are these like glimpses of hope. There are these moments where everything feels so perfect that you go, this is what it could be. This is what we could be. And we had those moments. He could make me laugh harder than anybody else could. In my gut, I knew that there were these issues that I knew were really wrong. And I very much allowed myself to believe and be told otherwise. So I think the main thing with us was that the first thing that I noticed, and that was very prevalent, was that there were so many arguments, like a lot of arguments. And they were the most unpredictable, out of nowhere arguments you can imagine. Like, normally, you know, someone says something or there's like a change in tension where you go, oh, this is going to escalate to an argument. It was never like that. It was always just all of a sudden now there's an argument, and it was always very intense. And every time the kind of language that would be used in these arguments is like, you're so angry, why are you yelling? Everyone can hear you, you're embarrassing yourself, kind of thing. And I'm very much not a confrontational person. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a bitch. Like, I will stand up for myself if somebody's yelling at me or having a go at me and I don't agree with that, but I don't like arguments. I grew up around a lot of them and I just don't like it. And will do everything I can to avoid one if at all possible. I'm very much a let's sit and talk about that kind of person. But these arguments were just very constant, very out of nowhere, very unpredictable. And to the point where I remember saying to him, I was like, this isn't normal. Couples should not be arguing this much. And I got told, and this was something that would be repeated to me often, yes, it does. You've just never been in a relationship. And I simply believed that because it was true. Like, I had never been in a relationship and this person that I was with had been in several. And I was like, you know, maybe I have just overly romanticized the concept of relationships and this is the reality of it. I don't know anything and this person that I love and trust is telling me otherwise. So what reason would I have to, you know, not believe that? And I always had this like gut feeling that that wasn't right. But what reason did I have to not believe what he was saying? So there would be these arguments, and quite early on in our relationship, I said to him, I was like, we can have as many arguments that we need to until I learn about you. Because let me explain that. I believe that arguments can equal growth in a sense that if you argue with somebody, there's obviously this common ground that hasn't been found yet. And then if you come to a resolution and you've learned about each other and it's an argument that won't happen again, then it's an argument that's worth having, if that makes sense. I don't know if I phrased that very well. And so I said that. I was like, I very much thought it was like a growing pains patch, or like just a patch of us having to learn about each other, and that the arguments would stop. And that's why I said, like, okay, I will be here and I'll be patient for as many arguments as there are for us to learn about each other and for us to get through this weird patch of, you know, learning what ticks each other off, what annoys each other. Okay. But that rough patch just never came to an end. And it got to a point where I honestly just felt like I couldn't do anything right. Something that I learned very quickly as well is that these arguments always ended with me saying sorry. Very often, more often than not. And not only saying sorry, but just kind of almost groveling. And I would say to him, like, I would be saying sorry and he'd still be angry. And I remember just being like, what do you want from this? Like, what do you want this outcome to be? What resolution do you want to reach? And he'd be like, I don't know. And it became quite obvious quite quickly that there was never a resolution. He just simply wanted to argue. And there was nothing I could do about that. I do want to take a moment to point out some things that were going on with me at the time, some context about me, because I don't want this to seem like, oh my God, I was so perfect and he was so nasty. So like this year in particular was very, very difficult for me. The year started off with my close friend passing away. And this was the first time I'd ever had somebody close to me pass away. And it was something that I really struggled with because it was this concept of my friend was the most gorgeous human. Like she was so talented. She was so amazing. She was so lovely and smart and everything under the sun. And she passed away so young and she still had so much to live for. And yet I was still here. And I was like a fraction of the woman that she was. And my brain just really struggled to cope with that. As well as this, I had a really bad reaction to Pfizer. I had like an allergic reaction to Pfizer, the COVID vaccine. And my skin like blew up into like welts and hives. And it was really bad rashes. It was very painful all over my body. I couldn't really wear makeup. I couldn't really eat. It would get triggered by the most random things. And it got to the point where I, didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to look in the mirror. It was very difficult. It took a very long time to be sorted out. And also I was in London at the time. I was living in London and I love London. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but you feel so tiny and insignificant, which at first is great. Because you're like, I can do whatever and nobody cares. But very quickly you start to feel tiny and insignificant. And I started feeling very lonely and I felt like all my friends around me were at a different point in their lives. And my parents and my family and my childhood friends and my boyfriend were all back in Brighton. And I just felt very lonely. There's like an Olivia Rodrigo lyric. Oh, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's very much like, we both drew blood, but those cuts were never equal. And that's something I think about a lot because 2022 was just a year for me that was back to back bad stuff. And I like, that must have been a lot for my partner, but I never did the things that he did. I never once sat there and went, you know what, I'm going to do this now. But I wanted some context because I don't want people to feel like I'm this absolutely perfect human, because nobody's perfect in a relationship. You have your little spats and your tiffs or whatever. But this was why I assumed that I was the problem, right? Because I was going through these things and I felt like such a nuisance to my boyfriend. And I was like, I must just be such a, just such a weight on him. And so I just assumed that these arguments must have just been because of me. And so I would apologize and I would grovel because why, like, it didn't make sense with my concept of love. Like, why would somebody who loved me argue with me for no reason? It must be because of me. There must be these reasons. And I just very much assumed that it was me. And so I'm going to tell you about a few of like the types of arguments that we'd have. So one of the first ones was around a month after my friend passed away. I got told that I was too sad to cope with, that I was too much, that it was like a burden on my boyfriend. And I apologized. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I remember just crying, being like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, you don't deserve this. Like, I'm sorry. I'll sort myself out. I'll figure it out. And I brought it up to him a much later date after we broke up. I remember saying to him, I was like, you told me that I was too sad to cope with after that happened. And he looked me dead in the eye and was like, we both know that's not what you were sad about. This very quickly meant that when I was sad or when there were things going on, I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want to look sad. I already felt like I was this burden because I'd already been told I was too sad to cope with. So I simply didn't want to say things. So when things like my eating got bad or whatever, I just wouldn't say. And then that would lead to arguments because he'd be like, why are you acting like this, kind of thing. Like, it was this really horrid cycle of like, again, no matter what I would do would kind of seem to cause this argument. one of the big ones was that I was at an event in Amsterdam with him and our friends, and I was supposed to be staying at an Airbnb with friends, and instead I ended up staying with him because the Airbnb fell through. So I ended up staying with him and his friends. And one night we all went out clubbing, and I got groped by this guy, as I'm talking like hands in my trousers, nasty. And they were great. They got the guy kicked out. They went out and argued with him. And my friend also got groped, and she was really, really triggered by it. And so when people were asking me if I was okay, I was like, yeah. Let's just focus on my friend, right? Because I was worried about her. And I'm actually going to read out texts that I sent to that friend as what was happened, because it's a perfect recount of what happened, because it was sent in the moment. So I say, things ended absolutely effed with my boyfriend. I can't even explain what happened. It was so weird. Like, obviously everything was fine and it was lovely. And then we're brushing our teeth and talking, and he slaps my shoulder where I'm sunburnt. I want to say this was not like a hit. It wasn't like a slap to hurt me. Now that I think about it, it's still weird as hell. Like, it was blistering red sunburn. I can't remember what it was, but it was kind of like a shut up, but still weird. Like, I don't know why he did that on my sunburnt shoulder, but whatever. Which obviously hurt like a bitch. And I'm like, ow, could you not? And then 30 seconds later, he does it again, and it hurt so bad I cried. So then he's like, oh my God, sorry. And I felt so embarrassed that I'd cried. I just stood there for a minute. I turn around and he's like, I'm sleeping downstairs. I can't be asked for this. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I'm not going to argue with you on my holiday. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, nah, I can't be bothered. So I go downstairs and I'm like, please come upstairs. And he's like, no, I refuse to argue with you. And I'm on the stairs just being like, you're starting an argument with yourself. And he's like, Jesus Christ, you're so loud. This is a nightmare. You're starting an argument on my lad's holiday. I'm going to come upstairs so you stop, but I'm just going to come back down here when you're asleep anyway. I didn't even care about the slaps that much. It's the fact that he got so mad after I just stood there. So I go to brush my teeth, and man, what happened fully hit me, and I started crying. Shit like last night feels so embarrassing and degrading. So I'm crying whilst brushing my teeth, and I hear him yell from the bedroom, Lexi, you're fine, stop crying. And I'm like, holy shit, who is this guy? So I go back into the bedroom, and he's ignoring me. And I'm like, is this really what's happening? And I can't remember exactly how the convo went, but I told him I was crying over the fact that I was literally groped. And he goes, Lexi, you were fine the whole night we all checked in on you, and you decide to start crying after I slap your shoulder. And I'm just sat there like, what the hell? And then he's like, you were yelling at me in my Airbnb. And I go, it's not your Airbnb, it's ours. I'm literally putting money in for it. And he goes, Lexi, it's not yours. You're only here because you've got nowhere else to go. After everything, I was like, are you drunk? And he said, no, I'm fine. It's the fact that it was completely out of nowhere. I was literally stood there like, what is going on? For the record, I wasn't yelling at him. I remember I was at the top of the stairs and he was like at the bottom of the stairs, sat on a sofa. So just that level of volume that you would use to talk to somebody who was there. Yeah, that was horrendous. And we'll get to like what would happen after those kinds of arguments in a minute. There were times where he would outright say that he didn't respect me or my emotions during arguments, or that I needed to fix myself, sort myself out. I had friends texting me saying, does he always talk to you like this? Because they'd see how he spoke to me and they'd text me. And I'd be like, oh, it's just like a funny bit he does. The arguments would be so loud that my roommate, and I found this out after we broke up, my roommate would stay up in case he needed to intervene, which is actually horrifying. And throughout all of the arguments of this nature, and this is just a handful of them, I told my friends that it was fine and that he was just stressed about work or about moving or his health. And I genuinely just never thought that he was the problem because, again, it didn't align with my concept of love. Like, why would somebody that I loved treat me like that? That made no sense. So, like, I must be the problem. That's the only thing that made sense in my brain. Because also I was, I'm going to say, I'll pat myself on the back. I was so good to him. I was a really good girlfriend. And that's something he said himself as well. Like, why would he then treat me like that? Did not make sense. Must be me. But the big thing was, again, there was never apologies. Or, no, not never. That's very, like, conclusive. More often than not, there were no apologies. There would just tend to be a message saying, like, oh, I love you, a few hours later. And I would accept that. And what would happen normally is that the morning after, he'd wake up and he'd laugh it off and go like, oh, you're right. And that's what happened the morning after that day in Amsterdam. He'd just roll over and go, you okay? And I'd go, no. And he'd be like, why? So I'd have to recount the night, and he'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Of course, I didn't mean it. I'm really sorry. I was, blah, blah, blah. And every time I would just accept that, and I would never really hold him accountable, which is very much on me. And it got to this weird point where he almost like romanticized how much we'd argue. When I was in Korea, he sent me a big message one night when he was like out about how much he missed me. And in it, he was like, I miss our arguments because it shows that we're growing. And when I was moving down to Brighton, the only time he shared any kind of excitement about me moving down to Brighton was when he was like, oh, I'm really excited for you to come down and we can argue and then you can storm home and I can come to your house and apologize to you in person. Yeah, it was just, at the time it seemed kind of almost funny, but now I look back and I'm like, that's mad. So looking back now, there's a lot of things that I realize were so manipulative outside of like the kind of blatant, obvious gaslighting, like the you're so angry, why are you yelling when I wasn't, that I'd like to talk about, because these are kind of like the big red flags and things that people, if this is happening to you in your relationship, you need to be so aware of that it is not normal. The main thing was that when the arguments were getting really bad, I eventually turned to my roommate and best friend to talk about things. And I remember there was one situation in particular where she came in because she could hear me crying, and she was like, what's happening? And I showed her the texts, because when you're getting gaslit, I can't even explain to you, I felt like I was going insane, because I was like, I'm clearly doing something wrong, but I don't know what it is. I can't figure out what it is that I'm doing wrong. And so I would show my roommate and I'd be like, am I crazy? Like, what am I doing wrong here? And she would go, no, like, please stand up for yourself. You've done nothing wrong. I remember saying to him, like, no, I'm not going to apologize. I've shown this to my roommate and I know that I've done nothing wrong. And he went, what? And I was like, yeah, like, I'm, and he went, oh, well, I guess now I can't trust you. I wish I had the screenshot so I could say it verbatim. I do have the screenshot somewhere. And he was like, I guess I can't trust you. I would never show our text to anybody. And then later on was like, oh, well, I won't bother talking to you then because I'll clearly be able to hear it from somebody else. And I remember feeling so bad. There's another time when I confided in a different friend and was told, don't talk to anyone who isn't your fucking boyfriend. And again, I apologized and said I was sorry. And it reached a point where I didn't know who to talk to. So I turned to my brother. And this was a big thing for me because my brother and my boyfriend at the time got on like a house on fire. Like, they got along so well. And I didn't want to ruin that. I didn't want any of my family. I didn't want anyone to dislike him because he was the guy that I loved. But I eventually told my brother, and it got to the point where my brother called me and he was like, I'm coming to get you. You need to come home. Like, I'm worried about you. This isn't right. And I was like, no. And after the conversation, I deleted all the texts because I was scared that my boyfriend would see them and get angry. Like, that's the point I'd reached. I was deleting texts to my own brother because I got scared that they were going to be found. Following this, we had this big conversation where it was like, if something's upsetting you, if there's something wrong, talk to me. This is so healthy. This is very much my way of thinking. I'm a big believer in communicating can solve like 99.5% of all problems in relationships. The other 0.5, break up, And so I was very down for that. But then it became this thing of, if I'd talk to him or confront him about things, he'd get angry and say that I was putting pressure on him or that I was being too much or not being understanding. But then when I'd keep things to myself, he'd then get angry that I didn't talk to him. And he'd be like, oh, is this really what you think of me? You really think that you can't talk to me about things? Like, I can't believe you think that of me, kind of situation. And it got to this point where, again, I didn't know what to do. So I just keep things to myself because the arguments that would follow were so exhausting that I just didn't want to deal with it. And at one point I said that to him and he went, if you're going to try and blame this on me, then just don't bother talking to me. And that was like, there was no winning. There was never any winning. There would be points where he would like yell at me or storm away from me in public in front of friends at events and things like that. And afterwards he would talk to me and be like, so-and-so hates me now, cheers. Or, oh, thanks, now this person's going to think I'm a dick. Thanks for making me look bad. Things like that. Over things that he'd done. Over things that he'd caused and done and stormed off about would be blamed on me. And I would feel awful because, again, I genuinely thought that it was my fault. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I've made my friends hate him, and I don't want that. And so many of my friends after the breakup, and I'll talk about this again a bit later, would be like, did not like the way he treated you one bit. Also, there was just a lot of projecting onto me, is the only way I can say it. He'd often call me a gaslighter or say that I was doing like a classic guilt trip on several occasions. Being called a gaslighter is a word that really triggers me. It's not something I'm going to go too deeply into, but I've just had some experiences that makes the word very triggering for me, because it is never something that I would do and is never a person that I'd want to become. Because it's something that's happened to me even before this situation, and it makes me feel really sick. And I told him that, and I'm not gonna lie, when I got called that, my reaction was, very distressed. I remember just screaming, being like, don't call me that, like, do not call me that. And he was like, whoa, like, what the hell? And he'd call me that and then would call me crazy when it would make me react. And it's not something he'd say super, super commonly, but he would often be like, oh, you're gaslighting me. Oh, classic guilt trip, like things of that nature. And he knew that it would upset me. And I told him the story why. And then I'd get called crazy when I would get triggered by it. Another thing was that obviously during this time I was looking for therapy, but also I was living in London. I was paying big bad London rent. I was paying London bills, and also I went private to sort my skin out. So I was spending thousands on my skin as well. And I really wanted to get therapy because I believe everybody should get therapy. Everybody, should get that kind of help. And I was looking into it, and when we'd have these arguments, he'd be like, you need therapy, you need to sort yourself out. And I'd go, I'm looking, like I promise I'm looking. And he would say that I was lying, and he'd be like, show me proof, give me proof that you're looking, or that you're sorting one out. Which obviously, like, how do you prove that? What do you want me to do? Go through my search history? And so when I couldn't bring up proof, he'd be like, you're lying. You're not even trying to make yourself feel any better. You're just relying on me. And that would loop back around the you're too sad to cope with section of the video. And even then, any like just small outbursts of annoyance I had, I'd get called crazy for. Like if I'd huff or storm out the room, I'm a girl. I'm a woman who gets on her period. There'd be times where maybe I'd just be grumpy, and I'd be told, like, if I snapped or anything even relatively negative, it was like, God, you're crazy. And I remember one time I like stormed out the house, so I was just, and he followed out after me and he went, Lexi, what was that? And I remember exactly how he said it. He went, Lexi, that was insane. That was crazy. No, Lexi, look at what you just did. That's insane. And he stayed angry for hours, and I sat there, and lo and behold, I had to apologize for being grumpy and walking out of my own apartment. And again, I excused all of it because, again, I thought it was all me. There's a section here that I kind of have in italics because it's not anything too important. I think there's a fine line between somebody just being a shitty boyfriend and somebody being the kind of person we're talking about in this video. But there was definitely also this concept with him of me just really desiring his affection and feeling worthy of his love, because I was never, like, we never took photos together unless it was at an event where we had no choice but to get a photo together. He'd actively say no to us getting photos together unless it upset me, and then he'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. We never took like selfies. We never held hands. I was never his lock screen. He posted versions of pictures that I wasn't in on even his private socials because we weren't a public relationship. Not even a B-reel. Like if we were laying next to each other, I wouldn't even be his B-reel, which, I just felt like that was a PDA boundary, completely fucking normal. And that felt like I was crossing it, because if anything would happen, he'd be like, oh, that's cringe. That's too much. You're attracting attention. And I guess that felt embarrassing, but it just kind of made me want his affection to be deemed worthy of being seen by his friends, right? Like he'd make a lot of jokes about sleeping with my friends, using me to get with my friends. He once, in front of a group of our friends, started telling me which of my friends he found hot, and then called me ridiculous when I got annoyed. He had a running joke that he loved short brunettes over tall blondes that he'd like double down on all the time. And whenever I'd point it out, he'd apologize and then keep going. And I just became very insecure in my own relationship. And I just felt, I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why aren't I worthy? Why isn't my boyfriend proud of me? Which now I look back on, and I don't know if that was just a projection of their own insecurities or what, but I became just so insecure so quickly. And I'm not an insecure girly. I back myself. But now we get to the point where towards the end of the relationship, I had my friends begging me to leave him, and I outright refused. I continued to excuse his behavior. And towards the end of our relationship, oh my God, I can only laugh at this. I was apologizing for being a bad girlfriend. I was sending him presents and saying, I'm sorry that I haven't been able to be there for you enough, because that was clearly what the issue was. That was the only thing that made sense, was that clearly I was not there for him enough. And I had this like guttural instinct and like this word vomit of being like, we're done, I can't do this anymore, because the arguments were getting so severe, and to the point where, like, again, he was outright saying that he did not respect me or my emotions. And then when the argument would end and I'd be like, you said you don't respect me, can we talk about that? He'd double down. I would just be going to be like, I can't do this anymore, we're done. Like, that was what the word vomit was asking me to do, but I couldn't. I didn't want to leave him, because I genuinely was like, I'm never going to find anyone like this guy. Like, he's so perfect for me. And like, you know, he loves me so much, even through everything that I'm going through and everything I've, like, you know, clearly I've been such a burden, and he still loves me. So like, where am I ever going to find someone else like that? So I didn't. So he broke up with me, in fact, and I thank God for that every day. And it completely blindsided me, because it happened drunk, and then we had a conversation a couple of days later sober. And my first heartbreak, oh my God, I was emotionally numb for a long time. I was 1000% faking streams. My friend broke up with her boyfriend quite closely after, so I very much kind of woke up, I think, then, and started trying to make her feel better. But I didn't feel anything for a very long time. I wasn't sad, I wasn't happy, I wasn't hungry, I wasn't tired. The only song that made me feel anything was Car Lights by James Marriott. So that song, I love it. It's a masterpiece, but to this day kind of gives me shivers. But the main thing was, after we broke up, oh my God, every single one of my friends was going, thank God we did not like how he treated you, or he was a bit weird, wasn't he? Like, all of these things, everyone was happy. Not a single person went, well, people would go, oh, I'm sorry that you're like going through this, but every single person went, thank God. Every single person. I think when you first go through a breakup, there's this sense of like the rose tinted glasses and really romanticizing what went on. And I voice noted to myself every single day, because I was moving and I couldn't go to therapy still, because I was kind of broke. So I'd voice note to myself, and I have voice notes on voice notes on voice notes of, and listening back is tragic, because I'm genuinely sat there like, I'm never going to find anyone like him. I loved him so much. Like, how am I ever going to get over this? Absolutely nuts. But post breakup, I kind of want to try and keep this as on the down low as possible, because a lot of personal things happened, but it just became this yo-yo of events post breakup that I look back on now and I'm like, this is nuts. This happened for nearly 8 to 10 months, I would say, after the breakup. So after the breakup, we kind of have our space. I go straight into healing, and I don't think I ever went through like a toxic phase or like a bad phase. I just went straight into being like, okay, I'm going to feel out every emotion. I'm going to cry as much as I can. I'm going to therapize the crap out of myself. I'm going to get through this, because I'm impatient. And when you go through a breakup, everybody goes, just give it time. I'm too impatient for that, bro. I'm way too impatient for that. No, I'm going to speed run getting over this. And eventually got to the point where, you know, we were living in the same city with the same friends. We were going to have to see each other, and we were friends, I guess. I'm not going to say anything about how he dealt with the breakup. That's totally on him. But yeah, it got to the point where I guess we were like friends. We were at the same events. We'd say hi. We'd have a hug, whatever. And then there came this weird breakdown where all of a sudden he was like, oh, the thing is, no, you're the love of my life. Like, I know you're the person I'm supposed to be with. This is something he swears he didn't say, but and so we then start talking about getting back together a couple months after the breakup, and we end up going on like a break where we completely had no contact. And then after that month, he was like, actually, no. And we cut things off again. I did love or host. Like, I got over it, and then I did love or host. And then that kind of brought this weird, like, few passive aggressive tweets that were like kind of aimed, that I had my friends sending me being like, this is weird, like, whatever. We had friends that were doing concerts, and I remember there was this one situation where a friend was doing a concert, and the week before my ex had done something and like ruined my night out, basically. So he goes, oh, you can go to this one, like, I'll let you go to this show. So we go to the show, and it's a great time, and afterwards we head back to Brighton, and we're going to go clubbing. I get a text from him, because I wanted us to be able to communicate to make sure that we're cool and that our friends don't feel uncomfortable, right? And he messages going, oh, I heard you're going to the club, I'm going to be there, which is absolutely fine that you'll come in. Just know that I'm probably not going to talk to you. Absolutely fine. Except when I turned up, he abruptly left, continued to tell everybody that I ruined his night, and later sent me a voice note saying that he gave me that night at the concert, and he kind of let me go, and I repaid him by turning up and ruining his night. A night that he wanted to go to, and I had the audacity to turn up and ruin it. he messaged girls that I was worried about when we were together, that he spoke poorly of. And then when they would block him, I would get the blame for it. And it was like, oh, you obviously made them block me. I did not. They blocked him on their own accord. And after all of this, I still went back to him. Still. And I think it was after that point that I went, this is bad. Because it had been a good few months at this point. And I was like, I need to cut this guy off. So, you know, I tried being his friend. We tried getting back together. So now I was going for we can just coexist. Like, I'm not going to give you the time of day. I start hearing that he's calling me crazy to his friends, and he's saying that I begged him to sleep with me or that I was way too eager. I start hearing all of these things. And so begins this really weird time period where it was like, I was doing nothing wrong. I wasn't doing anything to get at him. I just wanted my peace, and I was trying to protect my peace. But I was being made to feel guilty for hanging out with our mutual friends, or I'd turn up to a club that he was at. And next thing I know, I'd have strangers coming up to me being like, that guy's calling you crazy. I'm really sorry about that. Or I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Or girls would come up to me going, oh, he said that you were his ex and you were crazy. All sorts. Like, I cannot even explain to you. And throughout all of this, my friends were with me on these nights out. And I would have his friends coming over being like, you should go. It's really unfair that you're here. It was nuts. Like, it was a really weird time, to the point where I stopped leaving the house because every time I'd leave, I'd bump into him and my night would just be ruined. And I used to think that it was so normal to see your ex and to get not only sweaty hands and have your heart go fast, feel borderline panic attack, that you were going to pass out. Like, that's how extreme. It sounds like I'm being dramatic, but genuinely, I would see him and my whole body would just go into meltdown. And I thought that was normal. And it's not. Yes, you see your ex and your heart stops a bit and you're like, ugh. You're not supposed to feel that way. But I was so traumatized, I guess, from the amount of times that my night had been ruined. It was just like a preemptive, okay, what's going to happen this time? What's he going to do now to get at me and to hurt me? Because that's what it was. It was just months and months of me working on my peace and having it ruined. On top of this, he was stalking my socials. I got told this and I didn't believe it. I got told that he would check my stuff and I didn't really believe it. But then very quickly I got proof. He clicked on a link or on a tweet that I'd posted a week beforehand, and I got a notification of it. And I was like, okay, this is just really strange behavior now. You're telling people that I'm crazy, but then you're stalking my accounts at the same time. Keeping this weird eye on me. But early on post breakup, all my friends were in their thank God you're out of there phase. And one of my friends went, this is emotional abuse. The way he treated you, that's abuse. And I brushed that off so fast because I was like, you think that I'm going to let myself get gaslit? You think I'm going to let myself be treated like that? No. I have respect for myself. That would never happen. I refuse to believe it. I brushed it off so fast. But eventually I go to therapy. I didn't go about my ex. I went about my personal things because, again, I think everybody should go to therapy, and I have stuff in my life that's happened that I need to work through, and the subject of my ex comes up and I mention it in passing, and my therapist goes, this sounds like a toxic abusive cycle. And I was like, ha. And that's when I get told about narcissistic abuse, and I become aware of the term of narcissistic abuse. And this obviously really spun me, and I started noticing more and more things, and I started showing texts to friends, and my friends were going, that's gaslighting, that's this. And this word, because what the case was I felt like I was so stuck. A lot of my friends broke up with their boyfriends around the same time as I'd broken up with mine, but they were all fine now. Months later, they were moving on. They were seeing new people. They were good. And it felt like I was stuck. It wasn't like I was hung up on him. I just felt so stuck and unable to move on, fully let it go. And so when I start researching about narcissistic abuse, I'm like, this is it. And once I realized that, it was like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I felt validated because no TikTok breakup post I'd seen had related. None of my friends could really relate. But now all of a sudden I'm reading about this thing, and it's exactly what I went through. And it was the most validating breath of fresh air moment. And it literally felt like shackles off of me. It was, oh my God, the most relieving moment of my life. And it was kind of confirming, you're not crazy at all. This is like a trauma bond sort of situation. And I was actually then referred by my therapist at the time to a different therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse. But it was crazy. For a while, I didn't even want to be near men. I would go out, and if a guy would even talk to me, I'd freak out a little bit. I just felt very stuck. But then I had this weight lifted off my shoulders. And And it eventually came to a point where I would see my ex again. We were at an event in America that we were both at. And at this point, I'm like, do you know what? I'm just point blank ignoring you. Like, we tried being friends, didn't work. We tried being back together, did not work. I tried just to coexist with you in the same room, did not work. So now I am ignoring you, point blank. And very quickly it became a thing where I had my friends coming up to me going, oh, he's asking if he should talk to you. He says that you're clearly angry at him. All I was doing was ignoring him. Then came a situation where he tried to get me to talk to him by one of his friends bringing it up in front of our entire friendship group, which is not what you do. If you want to talk to someone, pull them aside and try and talk to them. But bringing it up in front of like 20 people to try and talk to me, strange. And then when I said no and walked away, to everyone he was with, he went, oh, well, that answers that then, guys. Then obviously when I hear that, I straight away feel guilty and I'm like, oh God, okay, maybe I was a bit of a bitch. And we end up having this big conversation where I say to him, I don't want anything to do with you. I have heard what you've been saying about me. I've been hearing this and this and this, and I list it all out for him. And he sits there and he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, none of that happened. I never said any of that. Refuses it all and even says things being like, are you really going to believe strangers over me? Are you really going to believe this person over me? You know me. Like, things have clearly been twisted. And you know what? I was really starting to believe it. I really did believe it because this was a person that I'd loved and trusted for a long time, and that I cared about, and I wanted to believe them. And then I brought up the point, stop stalking my socials. You're not going to help yourself. I show him the screenshot and he goes, I never did that. And I think in that moment, that kind of clicked for me as well, that I was like, okay. But the story changed very quickly from I never did that to, oh, I must have done it by accident, to, oh, I remember clicking on the link, but then like going off of it. Like the story kept changing, like actually genuinely insane. But we end up having this like, he argued against everything. He would say that things that happened didn't happen. But this conversation mostly just ended with us saying that we were going to completely cut contact. We weren't even going to try and look like we were friends online. And every time we'd have these conversations where we'd end things, I would say, you know, I wish the best for you. I really care about you. I want you to look after yourself. And I want you to be, I would like us to be okay at some point, but that's clearly not now. And now I don't think it's ever going to be that case, but we always ended in a caring way because he's someone that I'm always going to have love for. He's the first person I ever loved. But the one quote I remember really well is that I sat there and I said to him, I was like, you were very manipulative and abusive towards me. And he kind of glazed over and I kind of panicked and I went, I believe you're a good person. And him saying, I know I'm a good person. And I don't know, like, it just really stuck with me. I think that's the moment that I just really logged out. And it was strange because like the amount of things that he said didn't happen. It just led me for months to question if these things had even happened, if I was even valid, of saying that I'd been gaslit. Was I the problem? All these things. Like for so long I was driving myself insane being like, is it me? Am I the drama? Like genuinely, I don't even know anymore. But about a week after that, I did get like this strange apology where, I don't know, it was very half-assed. It was very like, clearly things between us have gotten very twisted by other people. I'm sorry I sometimes got angry at you when we were together. And it was a kind of message that if he'd have sent that right after we broke up, I would have thanked the heavens for it. But now I read it and I was like, you've done so much more than that now. You didn't just occasionally get angry. You, like, it genuinely felt like I was being tormented for months of my life. And I don't know if that sounds dramatic or what, but it genuinely, like, I did not leave the house because I just wanted to try and protect my peace that badly. And I still read that apology and I still feel guilty for not accepting it. I accepted it at the time, but now I've very much retracted my apology because I've very much retracted my thanks. That's kind of like the end of what has happened. And my final points really are like, it takes a long time, like the realization process. And even now I still remember arguments or things that happened and I go, that was not normal to tolerate at all. And there are parts of me that are very much spiteful. The fact that I will never know the truth of what happened, the fact that I was getting told this and then he would say the opposite. And that, you know, that's a lie. Like, why would you believe them? I'm never going to know the truth. I have people that swear hand on heart that he has done things and said things about me that he swears he didn't. And I'm never going to know the truth. And that's a really difficult thing to get closure from. It's also really hard to come to the realization that you've let yourself be treated in such a way that you allowed yourself to be disrespected. And I became like a shell of a human during the time of this relationship. Like, I think I lost that like glimpse of life that I had. And I very much remember when we were talking about getting back together, one of my friends went, are you sure? I haven't seen you this happy in a long time. And my parents said that to me as well. And that was something that really hit me. And even now I feel like I'm so much better than I was, but I still feel like I'm not 100% myself. And I honestly think that there is a part of me that this person has taken away from me that I've permanently lost. And I don't know if I'll ever be capable of being that naive and, you know, hopelessly romantic again, which like might just be a good thing. But I have a lot of healing left to do. I've spent so much time on my own, just learning to love myself again, because that was something that was completely stripped from me. I genuinely, I look back and I like cry for the human that I was. And I'm genuinely so mad that I didn't try and save myself sooner, and that I didn't see what was happening, and that I didn't save myself. Like, I'm a big person that believes in everything happening for a reason. And although this person taught me my first experience of love, they also taught me one of the most painful experiences I've ever been through, and I guess in the hardest way, how to love myself. And I think I have so much more respect and love for myself now that I never had before, because this person completely stripped that from me. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about this person. I don't know how I feel about my ex. I'm always going to have love for them. They're the first person I ever did love, and I'm always going to care about them to a degree, but I genuinely hate them for the way that they treated me, and never knowing if they meant it or if it was like a projection or a reflection of their own pain, and me like not being able to be there for them with that, but allowing myself to be treated as basically this emotional punching bag. Like, how are you supposed to feel about someone that did that to you, but that was somebody that you loved, right? I just try my best to find my peace, and I've always been a believer that things have to end with forgiveness. I've always thought that every argument, every situation had to end with forgiveness, and I've realised now that you don't need to, but there's still that part of me that is looking, and it's really, really looking for forgiveness with this person, and I just can't. And like, I look back at who I was during this, and I just do not recognise myself. I look back at videos, I look back at streams, and I don't recognise myself, and it makes me physically recoil. I can't look at any photo of myself from that time because I hate it so much. And there are like songs that I can't listen to, there are things that I can't watch, there are things that I can't do because the feeling it gives me and the things that it reminds me of is so visceral. But if anybody watching this, if any part of this video has made you go, that's like my ex, or like that's like my partner, I really do beg you to get the help you need, to confide in a friend, to get out of that, and to not think that you can be the one to change them or save them, because you can't. You really can't. I wish very badly that I'd saved myself, but knowing that this video could possibly be that for somebody else gives me hope. But I would say thank you for listening. This is a very long video. I also want to say thank you to my friends who were there for me through all of this, because this ordeal happened over such a long span of time, and I have friends that have been there through the entire thing. I have friends who've been there through a little bit of the thing, and I'm very, very grateful for the people that stuck around, because a lot of people logged out and a lot of people picked a side, and I'm a big believer in, breakups don't need to be everybody's business, but I'm very, very thankful for the friends that were with me, and thank you again for watching. I hope this video didn't turn out too long or too rambly, and I hope it made sense. And thank you very much. I love you all. Look after yourselves, please.